Port City Plate Podcast, presented by Bienville Bites Food Tour. The Port City Plate Podcast is serving up the food, history, and people of Mobile, Alabama for people who love the Port City. I'm your host, Chris Andrews. And first of all, I'm super excited to say that we are the Nappie Award-winning Port City Plate Podcast. We were just announced as the best local podcast, so I'm really appreciative of everybody that voted for us in the Nappies this year, and super excited. And I'm super excited about today's show, though, and it's a pleasure. We're going to talk some beer today, and our guest, needs no introduction to beer enthusiasts that are here in Mobile. Braided River Brewing has quickly become the most popular brewery in Mobile, and that's not just my opinion. They've got Nappie Awards as well to prove that. But David Nelson is the founder and owner of Braided River Brewing Company, and I'm really excited to dig into his journey. He's got a background in chemistry and went from chemist to a brewer, and now the founder of Braided River. So David, welcome to the Port City Plate Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And so first of all, tell us about what's your background. I mean, where are you from? And tell us how you got to Mobile.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to do the quick version of that. But I grew up in North Mississippi, went to Ole Miss, followed my then girlfriend to North Carolina, where she did her PhD in archaeology. And then while I was there working in a toxicology lab, I started getting into home brewing. That took me into volunteering at a brewery, which then took me to transitioning careers entirely. And so was a brewer for a while we were there. And then when she finished, she got a job offer at South. And so we made our way down to Mobile.
Okay,
so,
awesome.
Yeah.
And is she in the archaeology department at South? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Is she working on the project,
with
the Mobile
stuff.
River?
Yeah. So she's been on D'Olive Creek and some different spots around there, and
All right, cool. That might be a whole another podcast. Then we might have to do a tag team with your wife one day.
It's a whole cool process over everything they're doing with that. Yeah,
that's really cool. So tell us about Braided River, and tell us about what inspired you to start a brewery in Mobile.
Yeah. So when we moved down here, it was 2017. There were a couple of breweries on the horizon in Mobile, but they kind of already had their group of people together. And then, the only operating one at that time was Fairhope. And I really liked the guys over there, but I did not want to do a commute to Fairhope from Mobile. And my wife did not want to do a commute to the university from Fairhope. So, that didn't seem like a great fit. So I was like, well, I've, worked at a brewery for a long time, been at this brewery that's grown a bunch. Learned a lot through that, been a big part of that process, learned a lot from mistakes and missteps. It's like I feel like I really know what I'm doing with a brewery. Maybe I should just start my own as this thing's booming over here in Mobile.
Nice, I like that. Now, what was the brewery? You worked in a brewery in North Carolina, right?
Yeah, that was Lone Rider Brewing in Raleigh.
Okay, in Raleigh, okay.
Yeah.
And the beer scene up there is
big. So we moved to Raleigh, or the Triangle, in 2007 maybe, and I think 2006 was when North Carolina popped the cap, which was their big readjustment of alcohol laws, and you saw it go from maybe a couple of dozen breweries in the state to well over 100 in a few years. And then by the time we left in 2017, that's a few hundred, 300 maybe. I don't know, probably close to 500 at this point. It grew like wildfire there. Every little town, had its own little brewery or two, and all the big cities were definitely destinations for visiting a lot of breweries.
Yeah, I know. We went to Asheville, man. It was.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy.
Every
brewery.
neighborhood in Asheville has its own
brewery.
Block,
every block you walk, there was a different brewery.
Yeah.
So tell me about the name, the Braided River. Now, how did you come up with the name?
Yeah.
How did all that come about?
So when we moved down here, or before we moved down here, we were kind of looking at online at like what is there to do, what's the deal. Like neither of us had ever spent any time down here, and so had come across the America's Amazon documentary by Ben Raines, because we were looking at like what's the outdoorsy stuff going on around here, and started to see and read all this cool stuff after watching that, and just kind of like learning about the area, and then moving here, meeting people, and just, learning more about the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. thought it was super cool and exciting. And it was while I was trying to like work on the brewery and do business planning and come up with, branding and idea and all of that, I was like, well, what I really think is cool right now is this whole river system. And I think, it's something kind of cool and unique to this area. And then kind of stumbled into the Braided River concept, which is a geological term of a system of rivers. They come together, they start crossing paths, they slow down, they cross paths, and kind of intermingle. And I was like, oh, that's a great analog for what I think is great about craft brewing, which is, you get together over a beer, you slow down, you're crossing paths with people, you're intermingling, you're kind of building that community and ecosystem over craft beer. It's a great point of connection, a good experience out in a brewery or whatever, with somebody you've never met before. You can have this great conversation. You learn more about people. It's just a great way to build community, I think.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. And it is, the Tensaw Delta is one of the most
amazing spots.
It's so underappreciated. I think even for us that live here.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely one of those kind of hidden gems. And I don't think I'd ever heard that term Braided River until y'all came around. And so that is really cool that you discovered that. So talk about, I guess, it's the brewing process. I'm really interested in the brewing process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially with your background, in chemistry a little bit. And so, give us a big picture chemistry 101 process of how that works.
Sounds good. And while we do that, I'll crack open one of these beers.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, there you go. So this is Del Golfo. It's our Mexican lager. And Del Golfo means from the Gulf. And so what we were trying to do with this beer was when you're traveling, when you're down here, when you're looking for something local, this beer's from the Gulf, and it is for the Gulf. It is a flavorful, refreshing beer. That tastes like beer.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of those things. Like our whole thing has really been to try to craft beers that have a lot of flavor that you can drink on a hot day. We have looked at historical styles from like hot climates and such, and kind of bring our own spin to things. We're playing around with ideas and recipes all the time, but always looking for that like key drinkability and like lots of flavor. And so this one's 4.4%, nice light beer, but it's got like a lot of flavor to it.
Yeah, it does. That's the beach beer. That's the one you're on the boat on right there.
Right. So the brewing process is to break it down kind of as simply as possible, you got 4 main ingredients to beer. So you got malt, which is malted grain, generally barley. You got hops, which are a flour. You got water and yeast. And so basically the process, the grain goes through the malting process as a form of kilning, and you kind of are toasting the grain to different levels. And so during that process, you're making a bunch of starch available. And then when we go to make beer, we add that grain to hot water, activates the enzymes that takes it through to its next step, which is converting to sugar. And we get this real sugary liquid. Sugar provides food for yeast. Yeast produce alcohol and CO2. And then the hops provide bitterness, and kind of the inverse of the way you would add sugar to coffee, where you have this bitter drink and you add a little sweetness to the flavor you're looking for. With beer, you've got this very sweet drink, and you're adding a little bitterness to find the balance you want. So we're kind of mixing all of those different ingredients in that kind of, that's the base overlay, is we're trying to extract sugar from the grain, feed it to the yeast, and balance that sugar with bitterness from hops. So then within the grain, we have hundreds of varieties of malted barley, wheat, rye, other grains that are also used, corn, oats. And so within that, you can really build a lot of different flavors and profiles. So for something like this Del Golfo, it's kind of a golden color. We use some malts that add a little breadiness and sweetness, and a little bit of that golder color. We use a more traditional American hop that gives a little bite to it. When we look at something like our Hoppy by Nature, it's mostly just our single base malt that's pretty clean palate and not adding too much else. We're trying to get all of our flavor there out of the hops. When we're looking at something like our stout, we're adding a hefty portion of some really roasted grains that like look and smell like coffee beans essentially. And so you're getting flavor out of that. There's some that add a lot more chocolate flavor. And so on that malt side, you're kind of playing with all of that. As far as the hops, people have been cultivating them for centuries at this point, once they figured out that that was a good addition for adding that bitterness to beer. And so, they're native to Europe, and they grow in climates kind of similar. So the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. grows a lot. Michigan has become a new place for growing. And then Australia, New Zealand also have a pretty good hop growing scene these days. South Africa now too. And so just like wine grapes, there's a real terroir component going on. So all these hops produce their own flavor profiles on their own, and people are crossbreeding and mixing. And then when you grow them in different areas of the world, they also produce incredibly different things, and then also are crossbred and mixed. And there are just hundreds and hundreds of hops out there, all with very nuanced and specific kind of flavor profiles, from an herbal, spicy to mango and pineapple, wine-like kind of grapes, full-on marijuana. I mean, it's pine, cedar, all these kind of different flavors that just kind of it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, that's incredible. Where is the process? So if you're adding fruit, so some of the tropical kind of beers, where is that process at?
So fruit is going to bring a lot of sugar to the table. So with anything with fruit in it, we want to add that in the fermenter. And so kind of the process there. So what we'll do is we'll take our grain, we'll add it to hot water, extract these sugars from it. We'll strain that water out and boil it, which sterilizes it, and is also the point where we add the hops, which give us bitterness, flavor, and aroma. So the longer they boil, the more bitter, less aroma, the more aroma, less bitter. Then after we cool that down and add it to a fermenter where we pitch the yeast. So in that fermentation process is where we want to add the fruit. We don't really want to cook it. We generally use fruit purees, like our crushes are adding purees to there. And so with those, you don't want to cook that fruit, but you also don't want to add it after fermentation, because you could be adding a lot of sugar, which potentially could re-ferment in the package, and leave you with exploding cans, okay, or some stuff like that you really don't want to get into, and just not the product that you were trying to make. So while we add it, we know we can kind of control it through the fermentation process that way.
Right.
Yeah.
What is y'all's process compared to, say, the big brands like the Budweiser, Bud Light, Miller, some of that? Yeah. What is the biggest difference between what y'all do and what they
do? Massive equipment and pasteurization, some other things that they're just able to do. They're able to be just incredibly hyper efficient and control, every single thing all the way along through the process. So for us, we're taking a lot of measurements, we're making changes, and we're controlling to a certain degree, but we just can't get the information or make the changes on the fly that they're able to. And then they're kind of doing the same process. Their ability to minimize like oxygen pickup, to make sure every ingredient going in is exactly how they want it to be. Just that stuff is hard for us to match. We're dealing with agricultural products, the grain, the hops, and then of course yeast is a living organism. So sometimes those things turn out a little different or behave a little differently than anticipated, and we kind of So we just have to kind of roll with the punches instead of like they can make it work.
Yeah. Well, y'all got
or
the
they know
taste.
going in exactly what they're getting and what changes they need to make. Where we have to kind of find out along the way what may need to be changed.
Right. Well, and y'all's beer just tastes so much better, and you almost get spoiled. I know for me, you know, when you drink Braided River all the time, then if you go to an event and there's only you know, Bud Light or something like that, you're like, man, this is terrible.
Well, you know, a lot of people love those beers. They're also like very shelf stable. They pasteurize and do these things, and like, you know, there's a process of making people what they want, you know. But yeah, for us trying to hit some of those lighter beers like the Del Golfo or our beer here now, you know, we're trying to get a little more flavor going on in there, and we're just not able to, you know, make them as cheaply anyway, because we don't have the economy of scale and purchasing power of, you know, an international brewery. So it's hard for us to say like, well, here's something that is going to compete with Miller Lite, with Mick Ultra, with whatever. Well, we can't.
Right.
We can't price in a way that's competitive. So why try to make a beer that tastes exactly like that?
Yeah,
you know,
that's true. That's a good point.
Try to, you know, hits what's gonna what a craft beer drinker is gonna want. So,
All right. So what's our next one?
This one is Hang Loose. So this one is our hazy pale ale. This one's done a little bit differently. So with it, what we do, just as we're talking about the process, this one has a high portion of wheat in it, which adds some real smoothness to the body. And then on this one, all the hops we add in the fermenter. And so what we're trying to do with Hang Loose is create something with very little bitterness. And with the hops, what we're trying to do is get kind of their juicier components out. So we kind of selected hops on this that give us some like orange juice, some grapefruit, some of those kind of characteristics. There's a little bit of tropical kind of, a little bit of pineapple in there too. And so trying to select hops that kind of give us some of those juicy qualities, and then we're adding them all in the fermenter through the fermentation process to give a beer that just kind of tastes different from a normal hoppy beer. Like it's just a different way to express the hops than the traditional ways. So
when you're making a beer, are you thinking about a specific person or a target audience? Maybe when you make a beer like this, are you thinking of somebody that's not a traditional beer drinker when you make this? Maybe.
Yeah, it depends. You know, I think for us, like we'll have ideas or we'll try things, or we'll have some beer that we like but want to try a different version of, and then we'll have people in the tap room or that we talk to that are like looking for something specific. So, you know, when we started, we weren't doing any hazy beers. I was, for some reason, kind of anti-hazy beers, but I hadn't had many I liked at that point. And then I had some that were done a little differently than others I'd had. I was like, well, maybe I do like this style after all. You know, you got to be open to new experiences. Just like food. And so we kind of started playing around as people were looking for something hazy from us. And then it's like, all right, well, what's our version of something hazy that's kind of year round? Well, we kind of wanted something, instead of the general higher alcohol hazy IPA that has a fair amount of bite to it, and is not something that you would like sit on the beach and drink. We were like, how do we kind of take these juicy flavors that are refreshing and put them in a package that is something you would sit on the beach and drink? And that's kind of what directed us to Hang Loose. And we did a few different versions and trials and stuff, and kind of settled on something that we were like, all right, we like how soft this is and how juicy it is. And I definitely, if I want something kind of hoppy on the beach or on a boat, then this is exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And that's a good taproom beer too, I think.
Oh, for sure. With the tap room, you know, our core beers all being very like crushable, has led us to, you know, you can come and try a bunch of different things in the tap room very easily.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the different types of beer. So, you know, maybe, and I always bring up my wife, and people that listen to this probably think I don't like my wife because I always bring her up in examples like this. But okay, so I have a feeling she probably does not know the difference between an IPA and a stout and the different types of beer. So could you maybe explain that big picture, 30,000 feet, the difference between those types of beers?
So, I mean, really, you kind of just start with the history there. And you've got people brewing, all over. And water plays a big part of things. So I mentioned that's one of the 4 ingredients. Well, your water chemistry goes a long way into how the beer tastes. And so just over time, people were brewing in different places. And, they're trying all these combinations. Like I said, you got all these different types of malt and possibilities to malt it, all these different types of hops. They're trying different combinations over time, and they're brewing to what the public likes. And part of that kind of goes into where they are and what their water is. And so it turns out that the darker roasted malt is very acidic and adds a lot of acidity to the beer. And so in a place like Dublin, the water is extremely hard, extremely alkaline. Well, that buffered out that acidity real nicely and made a really beautiful stout there. In the Czech Republic, the water is extremely soft, and that worked really good for these light pilsners. And so over time, people are trying these different things in places, and people are loving this pilsner in Pilsen, and that's partly because it's what people liked, but the water source is making that a really good beer. The old example is if you took like Pilsner Urquell and Guinness and you just fully flipped those breweries and employees from one location to the other using the opposite water source, their beer would suck. No matter how much technology and great stuff they have, using that different water would make a very thin, insipid stout and a very I don't know what would happen with that pilsner. It would not be it'd be a harsh pilsner to drink instead of, what it is now. And so just kind of over time, you had those things happening. So people with different taste everywhere, and then brewers and breweries that were using their talents to come up with things that people liked. So the 2 main parent groups you have are ales and lagers. For a long time, it was only ale. At some point, Louis Pasteur discovered lager yeast, which was able to ferment colder and cleaner, meaning it didn't add any flavor or very much flavor to the beer. And so when you look at light lagers, the idea on those is that really all you're tasting is the malt and the hops. Ales ferment differently and bring their own flavor profile. And there's also hundreds of versions of ales out there, or of yeast out there. And so they're each adding a little bit of something to that, and you can kind of blend that with the different flavors. Then you kind of get into the darker malts for stouts and porters versus browns and ambers with some amount of milder malt, medium kiln malt in there, and so on. And then all the IPAs that came from the English exporting beer to India. The colonies there, they had figured out hops are a great preservative. They're antiseptic. And so adding more hops to a beer was making it travel and hold up better in a barrel on a ship that had to go from England to India. And then when it got there, apocryphally, the people were like, oh, this tastes way better than the regular ale. We like this with all the extra hops in it, da-da-da-da-da. And that's where India Pale Ale was born. And then, over the years, in the U.S., somewhere in the 90s or 2000s, IPAs really started to become a thing, and brewers just kept adding more and more hops, and then learning and finding about all these different hop varieties and adding more in there to just more and more flavor and flavor. So our Hoppy by Nature here, it's a more traditional kind of American IPA, but it's very hop forward. The malt base is very, background, and you're getting some kind of fruity notes out of the hops. We use a yeast that adds a little bit of a fruity note too, so you're kind of getting some tropical and stone fruit vibes out of this with a nice bitterness also to kind of balance that. What's really interesting on a beer like this too is it gives the impression of sweetness, but it's not actually technically sweet. This was fermented out to where there's very little residual sugar in it. However, the hops that are bringing those kind of sweet flavors and the yeast as well are giving you that like sweet impression. So finding that right balance of the bitterness and the sweetness in there is kind of the tricky thing.
It's almost the IPA is almost a mixture of the two that we've already had, right? You taste a little sweet,
yeah,
but also you feel that but that's interesting about the IPA. I did not know the history there of the
So
pale ale.
So many of the beer styles have just evolved over time based on what people like, what's selling, what the public wants, and people have kind of stumbled into one thing or another and then just rode the wave.
Yep. I want to go back to your location there, St. Louis Street at the Wheeler Loft, and so tell us about the location there and the history of that building.
Yeah, so it's a cool spot for sure. We when I was trying to get things started up, I had someone introduce me to Bester Ward, who was redoing the building there, and he had that space in the bottom looking for a tenant, and we talked, and he was hugely supportive of us and helpful, with us getting going down there, and really liked the idea of having a brewery. So that building was originally a Chevy dealership. So in my understanding, St. Louis Street, and then there's some articles out online that I think you can find to corroborate all this, but St. Louis Street was called Automobile Alley at one point, and it was basically the main hub on the Gulf Coast to buy a car for a long time. And so where we are was the Chevy dealership. Across the street's the Buick. Next door to us, Precision Engineering's in the Dodge building, and they've still got the Dodge Brothers emblems above the door. There was a Cadillac down the street. There's a couple of others, but basically all these buildings were built as car showrooms with garages in the back, and you can look at them and you see, like in our bar, there's the big showroom windows, and in all these kind of up and down the street. And then it was we have also the original tile floor from that showroom tile floor in there, where they had Model A's, whatever in the 20s and 30s in there.
That's really cool.
And then they had ramps where they drove them upstairs, so the upstairs was also like cars up there too. And then you can see on the sides of the buildings too, the big garage bay doors where they'd bring things in and out for maintenance. So yeah, it started off like that. At some point, I think in the 40s, it was the press register. And so if you look at our floor, we have these long concrete trenches going through the brick tile. And that was when the press register had like secretary desk there. And, in the 40s, if you think of how much would have been done by typewriter and manually and whatever, you can tell they just rows of secretary desk in there and desk, so like, so it's that. And then afterwards, I think it transitioned through a few things, but eventually like the windows all got bricked in. It was a drug warehouse for a while. It was then Safe Archives for a long time, right before it was flipped. So document storage. So the whole thing was just, fully bricked in. And people, ask me what was there, and I'm like, you would never have noticed it. It was just kind of a blank building. And I think that's what's been really cool about what's happened on St. Louis Street is you have some cool old buildings that have kind of been forgotten about or hidden, and you've seen a lot of people rehabbing and turning those around with the historic tax credits. It's been a real cool transformation over there.
Yeah, the building's beautiful, and it's definitely, if you haven't been, you got to go. And I love the history of the Automotive Alley for sure.
Yeah.
What were some of the challenges when you first started? I mean, you had to have had some challenges, right, to
Yeah.
start up a brewery.
Oh, for sure.
What were some of those things you had that you had to overcome?
Well, getting financing to start with.
That's a big one.
Yeah. So, and just being totally out of my depth. I had never started a business. I knew how a brewery should run, but I didn't really have any money or business experience. And so, or connections. I had just moved here. Fortunately, I found was introduced to some really great people around town. Had an advisor with the Downtown Alliance. Denise Browning was there. She helped me with some business planning stuff, and then the Small Business Development Center, Mel Washington, out at South. He also, took me on, and so there was some real resources in town to help try to get people going. Found these people, and then I had just meeting other people in Mobile. I feel like what I got was a real positive attitude from everybody I met that like, hey, we love Mobile. We love more things being here. If there's anything I can do to help you or anybody I can introduce you to. And that's, I kept just getting introduced around, which is how I found those two advisors, how I ended up meeting my landlord. It was just a lot of that over time. And then just trying to, work out the business plan, work out how this is all going to work, kind of build that coalition of people to kind of make this happen. And, and then it just teetered back and forth. As far as things go, the ABC has changed some laws in recent years that have helped some things. This is still a very strict 3-tier state, meaning there's separation between production, distribution, and retail. So I could not have anybody invest that had any stake in a license in one of those other tiers, which is fair to some extent, but also difficult when you've got when you're trying to start a brewery. People that might want to give you money also might have given money to a bar at some point or whatever.
Right.
And just because they own 1% of a brewery and 1% of a bar doesn't mean they really exercise any control. So there's some things like that kind of made it a little trickier getting going. But, in general, had enough, good people around, giving good advice, and just also was prepared that like, hey, this is the process. There's going to be a lot of hurry up and wait. There's a lot of things you can't do until everything is signed off, and there's some frustrations on that too of like, hey, our place is ready to move into, it's ready to start brewing, it's da-da-da. Still months before we can do anything in there legally. And, it was an ordeal, but, was fortunately generally prepared for that.
Yeah. That's really cool that you mentioned, about how supportive Mobile is. And I think that we are. I mean, we're really supportive, especially of new businesses. When new businesses are talking about coming here, the question I always get from people is, the new restaurants, right? I mean, everybody's always asking me, like, what's new, what's coming soon, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that is really cool that, everybody's so supportive of you in the beginning like
there
that.
were some people that told me, oh, Mobile's a old boys club or blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, I haven't, I'm sure I've seen parts of that, but in general, everybody has been like, hey, we want Mobile to be the best it can be. And it doesn't matter if you're from here or not. If you've got good ideas and are trying to put in some work and make this town a better place, like people here really get behind that.
Yeah, so. I think, and that kind of leads into what I want to ask you about. And the biggest thing to me, what y'all do is the collaborations.
Oh yeah.
Y'all collaborate with so many different businesses and nonprofits, and I'm specifically thinking recently, y'all collaborated with Callahan's for their 75th anniversary, and had a special Callahan's beer with a special label. I'm thinking about the king cake beer that you do during Mardi Gras. Using Dropout Bakery real king cakes in your process. So talk about that collaboration that y'all do, and really, I guess, how that's been to your business.
Yeah, no, I mean, I talked originally about, the idea of beer building community and doing these things, and there's that's what we got into it for, is to build that community and to build those connections and engagement in and around Mobile. We also, because we, have the the Delta in our name, basically we want to also promote and partner with the groups that are doing something to like take care of that and make that a place for all of us to enjoy. So that's, we started with Mobile Baykeeper and Alabama Coastal Foundation as partners on some beers, and then kind of grew from that with other environmental groups, and then really did start, like I said, we want Mobile to be a great place for everybody and have something and be there for whoever and however. And so, partnering with the groups in any way we can, to add some visibility and some fun with their own beer, I think has been really tremendous. Stuff like with Dropout, that's super cool to be able to get to use their king cakes, and especially them being just down the street from us. Like, it's a great connection there. We did actually one of our first ever beers. We did with Carpe Diem Coffee. Alan there is just a great guy, has a great operation going over there. And then, as it's evolved over time, we've done stuff with the Aubrey's Army Foundation, United Cerebral Palsy Mobile, with these groups that are trying to make life better for people that live and work in Mobile. And I just feel like, we're still a small business. There's only so much impact we can have, selling a few cases of beer, but to highlight the work all these groups are doing and the cool institutions of this town, like Callahan's, to be able to do a beer with them was super cool, and just promote their anniversary and have something special for them. For us to get to be a part of that, I thought was super cool. And it is just hey, this is a fun town. This is also a town that likes to drink, and doing these beers and collabs with people has just been a super fun part of things.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been the biggest driving force behind your business. I feel like in the popularity.
Yeah,
of
it's been a great way for us to just get in front of new audiences. That's by the time we started, I think we were the 5th brewery in the town, and so people had stopped being just inherently excited about new breweries. And so, and I still get plenty of people that have never heard of us or have heard of a couple of the OGs, but don't, and so working with these groups really does help, put our name out in front of some other people and try to, show rather than tell. It's hey, if we're going to say all these great things about how we love the Delta and how we love Mobile, it's nice to actually show us being a part of these things. Same thing with having beer at different people's events and such. So
yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I want to ask you about the Oyster Stout. And the Oyster Stout, there's a lot of history there, right? I mean...
Yeah, so that's another historic thing. So I mentioned with the stouts earlier that the dark malt is very acidic. So oyster shells have a lot of chalk in them, which is very alkaline. And so what somebody figured out at some point was hey, we can, manipulate our water to give us the beer we want. And they started adding oyster shells to brews for their stouts. And that seemed to work out really well.
Now, are they crushed? How does that work?
So for us, we knew about this, and we're like, oh, this would be pretty cool in this area. And so we partnered with the Oyster Shell Recycling Program, which is run by the Alabama Coastal Foundation. And so what they've done is they've set up bins at all the big seafood restaurants. They collect all the shells, and then they put them back out into the bay or wherever to create new reefs and habitat. So what we do is we basically intercept some of those used shells before they go back out. We clean them up, and then we boil them. We add them during the boil process of the beer. And so during that, we just have big steamer basket full of shells we lower down in there. So the boiling action, further sterilizes, which is, again, the large part of the point of the boil. And then, it helps extract a lot of that, the chalk and whatever we can out of those shells. And you get a little bit of the, seawater brininess or whatever out of that too, which adds a nice little touch.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so then Then after we use those shells, we put them back in a bin and they go on their way. So,
Okay. Yeah. Back into the bay.
Yeah. So we coordinated with Coastal Foundation on like getting shells for that and everything. And it's been a really cool process. And again, one of those things that was just trying to highlight something cool that a local group was doing. Like you don't think about it until somebody says that they're recycling the shells. Well, yeah, these restaurants are going through boatloads of oyster shells that are all just going to the dump. Well, them setting up this program, very, like slam dunk, no brainer, like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Just collect all the shells and dump them back out in the bay. It's a little more strategic than that, but still like, as far as like, helping to maintain and reestablish the ecosystem of the bay, like things like that make a big difference. That is a great program. I know we basically ate all of our oyster shells out of Mobile Bay, and it hadn't been until recently where we started kind of refurbishing those reefs. And what's our next beer that we have? So this is New Wave. This is a part of our Day Drinker seasonal series.
Okay, I haven't had this one.
It's we call it a modern pilsner. So it is a kind of based on the Czech style pils, which is a clean, hop forward, slightly bitter beer. But we used, so instead of the traditional Czech Saaz hops that add a very like spicy herbal kind of character, we used the New Zealand version of those, Motueka. So I think they're either Saaz or Saaz parentage, grown in New Zealand, and they add this like fruity and limey character to it. And we thought, oh, that's just a nice twist for this kind of climate. So you get this like, it still drinks generally like a pilsner, but you get that like citrusy zest and like tropical vibe from the New Zealand hops. It works really nice.
The aftertaste, I can tell.
Yeah, so this has been, I drink this a lot whenever it's in season. I think it hits a lot of the notes that I really want out of a beer. Yeah.
And y'all also do a lot of themed beers, and I think that's been one of the most popular things also that I've noticed from y'all is, you have a different themed beer. And I know for us, with our tours.
Right.
The themed tours are always the most popular, right? Everybody wants to, get on those themed tours.
Yeah.
And so that's what y'all kind of tapped into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so for the tap room, and we have kind of two different avenues, or three, I guess, really. We have our tap room, we have our can distribution out into off-premise locations, and then we have our keg distribution into on-premise, bars and restaurants and such. And so with each of those, you kind of have different goals. With the cans, we want some amount of like good crushable 6-packs, and we want a little bit of variety flowing in there too, but we want some beers that people recognize that are mainstays and that they want to grab to take to the pool, out on the boat, etc., take home and drink and watch TV. For the bars, we also, similar kind of thing, we want some mainstays. We also want some occasional rotation things for places that want to switch out beers a lot or have something new on. And then for the tap room, we really we do need our mainstays there because we have plenty of people that come in that haven't tried any of our beers. But what a lot of the tap room crowd is coming for is for extra variety. So we keep 16 taps on, and so we've tried to have something for everybody there. And so part of that is creating kind of fun and new stuff. We generally, have whatever ideas, and we'll put that on in the tap room. Maybe a little of it goes out into distribution, depending on the beer. But it's a place for us to just kind of play and have fun and do stuff like this Blood Orange Dreamsicle, different kinds of over-the-top IPAs, etc. They don't necessarily have to be super marketable or sellable in a broad sense, but they're exactly what you're looking for when you go into a tap room and you want to try some new stuff.
Yep.
That kind of gives everybody a lot of avenue to have some fun there. Yeah.
Have you seen some success stories from your tap room? So something that's been really popular in the tap room that you ended up distributing?
Yeah, for sure. I used 2 of these. So the Hang Loose was that way, but that one was pretty early on in our growth. But then last year, the Del Golfo, we had done that as a taproom beer, and just kind of had people kind of responding that it really fit a zone that we hadn't been filling, and they really liked that. It's a little bit darker and fuller than our beer here now, our light beer, but still very much a beer that tastes like beer in a way that people are looking for in a bar environment and elsewhere. And so, yeah, both of those actually kind of grew out of that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then something like the New Wave was a taproom one that then moved into seasonal status.
Okay.
So, yeah, and then we have taken things out and replaced them with others and kind of moved stuff around in that way for sure.
I want to ask you about your taproom, and also you have the most friendly staff. I mean, everybody in there.
Oh, thank you.
John,
Yeah.
everybody in there is just super, super friendly. And talk about maybe, your idea of customer service, and, that they're not friendly just because that's not a coincidence or an accident, right?
Right,
It comes from the top
right.
down. Talk about maybe your customer service, how that impacts your business.
I think people have a different expectation when they go to a brewery. Or the same with like a bar that does a wide variety of stuff. Like, you're not there just to drink and be left alone. You're there because you want to try some stuff. So we do flights, we do things like that where you can try a bunch of things, and we want our bartenders to be knowledgeable and friendly and want to talk to people about beer. So we make sure to let them know what's going on, try to explain the beers as best we can, so that information can get to the consumers that are coming in to try some of this new stuff. So yeah, like, you want the experience to be very customer focused rather than necessarily like volume focused. So occasionally we get to times where we have some long lines because we have some chatty people that are coming through asking a bunch of questions, and we don't want to just say shut up, go sit down. It's like, we want to answer the questions and help them find the beer that they want to be drinking, so that we want them to have a good experience. We want them to come back for more and recommend us to their friends as a good place to go. So really focusing on that. You mentioned John, he's got a big fun personality, and so having him in charge of the tap room and just bringing that super positive attitude, those vibes help set a good tone, for a fun, friendly environment. And, I think we've definitely, like you said, just tried to make an effort on that, and tried to, staff and hire in a way that really supports that.
Yeah. And the tap room is also kid friendly. I think that's important for this audience
absolutely.
as well. You can come with your kids and drink beer in the tap room.
The craft beer demographic is very much a people with kids demo.
Yeah. It's not like nobody's going to look down on you for bringing your kids into the brewery.
Yeah, absolutely. So we keep some juice boxes and some other things around for kids, so that you can get through a beer without having to listen to your kid complain too much about having to be there. We'll see a lot of people with kids will meet other people and have a little group kind of set up there. That way the kids play,
Yeah.
We've got all the picnic tables outside, plenty of room inside. So, we've tried to make things as friendly as we can for families, for kids. We don't have a big outside space that is as friendly as, some places could be, have been. So you still got to kind of keep an eye on your kid because you're right on the street if you're at a picnic table. But yeah, like we've definitely kind of tried to foster that like family and community environment.
Yeah.
It's not a place where people are coming to do a bunch of shots and get crazy. It's people coming to try some beers, hang out, have a good time. And so that meshes just fine with having some kids around.
Yeah. And food trucks too. I mean, y'all got a lot of food trucks that come in and out there.
That's one big thing over the last year. John's done a great job on just coordinating and working with them. I think there's been more food trucks on the scene over the last year or so as well. And then we've pulled some that have been maybe not downtown as much, whether they're new or just, have typically been just in West Mobile or maybe across the bay or something. So we've had some really great regulars. Los Roland Bros, who does the best burrito tacos in town. They're there every Wednesday with our trivia night. And then they also show up periodically through the rest of the month for other events and stuff. And then every Friday night, we also have a food truck. And so we've had a lot of Mexican themed ones recently. Las Taquerias, Taco Spot, and then the arepa truck. It's phenomenal, and nobody else is doing arepas around here. She moves around all over the place too. We had a Cajun guy from New Orleans during Mardi Gras, and so we've really tried to work with who wants to work with us and like give preference to the ones that are reliable. I'm sure you've heard plenty of horror stories about food trucks and people, and things happen.
That's right. Yeah.
For some, things seem to happen constantly, and so then you're kind of like, well, you've left us high and dry like a lot, versus like, the ones that are, still figure out how to make it work, or like had a backup plan and are there and are and there's some of them just like. Some of these guys, like they really want to work. They're there to make some money, and they're going to show up and they're going to get stuff done. So
I know a good one I've had was Stu from the Mac and Cheesery.
Stu, I guess I left him off. He was our regular for Thursday nights with the Mac and Cheesery stuff, but he's got his box out spot coming on like any day now, and so he hadn't been around as much. But like Stu for the Thursday night and Thursday night run club was a mainstay for us for a long time.
Yeah, I know when I was doing some Thursday night tours, that was usually always my. I usually don't eat during the tour,
right.
So when after the tour's over, I've watched everybody eat for 3 hours, and you need to eat, really quickly. So I would go to Braided River before y'all closed.
Yeah,
get some mac and cheese. Get a 6-pack to go. And that was a good call.
Yeah, and he did some really cool stuff. Came up with some fun ideas, and he'd do some themed stuff. So I'm looking forward to his spot whenever Box Out gets going. Yeah,
that's gonna be a good spot.
Yeah.
Another, I think, kind of secret to the tap room is y'all got some seltzers and things like that as well for some of the ladies.
That comes in. Well, it's just for everybody.
For anybody.
Yeah. The seltzers. People do think of the seltzers as being more of a female-friendly drink.
And I say that because I know we took some tour groups in there, and the ladies loved it.
No, exactly. There's definitely a lot of that, but there's more guys than you might think on that too. But yeah, that was one of those things as we got going. The way Alabama law is, as a manufacturer, the only alcohol we can have on premises is what we produce. And so you have people coming in that aren't beer drinkers, and that's fine, that's fair, And so if I could, I would have just bought some nice wine and put that in and like had that for people. I'm not interested in making my own wine because however we would go about doing it, it would be probably kind of crappy wine. And just to have it is not, that's not doing anybody any good. So we were looking at what are our other things that we can do. Seltzer can be made under a brewing license. So that was a slam dunk on that. The cider, actually we had started with the cider. Same thing. And the cider and the seltzer, both gluten-free. So people with, celiac or gluten intolerance, we got 2 options for them. And then we also expanded this year with the hop water. So that's fizzy water that's flavored with hops. So if you think of a LaCroix, but the flavors that you're getting from like a Hoppy by Nature or whatever in there. So it's, it's really just basically a LaCroix, but it's a great NA option. And so, we've had a lot of people in dry January or just somebody that's out with a harder drinking group that doesn't want to drink that hard. It's good to have something with some flavor but no alcohol to it. And for us, like the hop water was kind of an easier attempt than trying to do like non-alcoholic beer or something. It's like, hey, this feels more refreshing and hydrating, and it is hydrating, so let's go with that. So, and the those of us that work there drink on that tap all day long every day. So
I want to ask you about the beer scene in Mobile. You mentioned earlier that when y'all started, y'all were the 5th brewery in Mobile, and there's no longer 5 breweries in Mobile. But so where do you see the beer scene in Mobile going, and where do you see Braided River kind of as being a part of that?
Well, I think nationally, you've got craft beer has gone into a slump. So it's not just Mobile. Like if you're looking macro level, there's been just a ton of growth over the last several years. Pandemic kind of just threw a wrench out there into everything for everybody. and then there's been some recalibration and whatever since. I think it kind of continues to swing back up. You know, it's kind of like the stock market. I don't know.
Right.
You have some big dips, but then like it's been an upward curve for a long time. You know, I think for the Mobile brewing scene, I don't know. I've heard people with different opinions on things, but what I like to point out, a friend of mine a little while back, somebody gave him this book called 100 Years of Brewing, and it was written in the 1900s. So it was for 200 years ago. They had these pictures in there of the original Mobile Brewing Company from the 1890s, Bienville Brewing Company, and where they were. One of them was on Water Street, and one of them was just north of Beauregard, and just how much beer they were capable of producing. And so in the 1900s, and at that time, they also had Budweiser as a national brand being distributed. But the Mobile Brewing Company in like 1901 or whatever had more capacity for producing beer than all of the lower Alabama breweries do now. In fact, you know, probably half of what Alabama's capacity was. Like with a much smaller population
That's
base.
incredible. Yeah.
They were, you know, they had, you can see the pictures of them on the map. They've got like horse stables and an ice house and something. You know, when you have that local focus, you see these much larger businesses, you know, existing and supplying and whatever. And I think it's just been a thing, you know, and especially this past few years, and I think it's the same with restaurants as well, where it's hard to compete with national and international chains that have purchasing power and supply lines that, you know, breweries, restaurants just can't touch.
Yeah.
You know, we all have to charge a certain amount to, you know, make things work. And in more trying economic times, that doesn't necessarily make sense for everybody. And, you know, I get that, understand that. So I think it's one of those things that it's also, though, the bigger we are, the easier it is for us to be more competitive price-wise.
Yep.
So it's kind of a catch-22 on that. But, yeah, I think, you know, to get back to those 100-year-ago levels of beer production in Mobile, it is just more and more local focus, you know, I think and I think there's still room for that and all the macro. I'm not trying to say we need to run any of the macro brands out of town. There's still plenty of room for them and plenty of place for them. But, you know, I think the more that people kind of get onto the idea of like, hey, there's some things out here with other flavor that are doing other things for me. I enjoy those. You know, a lot of our drinkers don't drink Braided River or don't drink craft all the time. That's great. You know, it's trying to find the people that don't ever drink one of those and kind of turning them on. And that's where I think some of the scenes where, like you talked about North Carolina, when you've got a town with like, if there were 10 or 15 breweries in Mobile, I think that'd be phenomenal for us. I think that would get a lot of people trying craft beers and a lot of people with the idea like, hey, I want to go down and try all these breweries and da-da-da. And everybody's going to have their favorites and then blah, blah, blah. But like it creates more consumers than it creates competition. And so, you know, I hope as we go, you know, we kind of get more to that. You know, from where we've been with all of us kind of opening, most all of us opening just pre-pandemic, kind of trying to sort through all of that with, you know, distribution's a tough game, dealing with change is a tough game. You know, you got have a lot of things working right for all of that. But I hope we kind of can get growing again and add some more breweries to the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to think, your biggest hurdle would be the people who are so loyal, right? I mean, you've got a loyal group of people that I think they're probably gravitate more toward the bigger chains and bigger chains of beer that, right, you just don't ever switch from those. You don't ever try some of the
right.
craft
You don't try
breweries,
things,
right?
and you're not getting and see that's where you know, not everybody comes to downtown.
Yeah,
you know, and tries all the stuff. So and that's where I like to liken us to restaurants because you know, I've talked to people that are like haven't been downtown for years or only there's one place they go and that's it. And it's just like, well, if you like that restaurant downtown, there are 5 others that are just as good, if not better, that you should try sometime. And some people just don't want to try new things and whatever. That's fine. Or it's just, whatever reasons, but it's just like, hey, there is a lot of cool things down here. And so if you come and start trying and break that seal, and then, you maybe every now and then you buy some of our beer in your fridge or whatever, or you buy us on draft somewhere. But I think it is like, it's that what we look for and hope for is, Mobile and especially downtown growing together. I think we all feed off of each other in a really good way. In something like St. Louis Street, which is kind of an up and coming corridor, I want to see more businesses and thriving businesses on that street with us. That's bringing more people over there off of Dauphin and exploring all of downtown. So yeah.
That's right. Yeah, well, and I don't have any doubt. I think this group of listeners, they're definitely more adventurous. So y'all definitely have got to get out to St. Louis Street and get to Braided River, which I'm sure most of you probably have. But you got to do it again and try some of these different flavored beers for sure. The different limited releases and everything that y'all got going on in the tap room. Y'all doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, I want to transition to our next segment of the show, and it's called Meat and Three. So we've already gotten into the meat of the podcast, and I've got 3 questions that I wanted to ask you.
All right.
3 burning questions that everybody wants to know about David Nelson. So on a Friday night, what are some of your favorite restaurants in Mobile?
Ooh, it depends on the occasion.
Yeah,
I think so. If we're doing like a anniversary dinner, special birthday dinner or something, then Hummingbird Way is going to be, we've really loved, Chef Jim's stuff there. It's been really fantastic. If we're just taking some friends out for a good night out, like I love eating at the Haberdasher.
Yeah.
I mean, I love going there in general. I feel their food people kind of sleep on sometimes.
We've talked about that on this episode a few times. People have mentioned that, and I agree with you. The food is really good there. You don't think about Haberdasher when you think about going out to eat, but you should.
Yeah, you absolutely should. I love going out to Bluegill if I got some out of town people sitting on the back patio out there. Recently tried Slurp Society. I'm excited to have that in town.
Yeah.
They're great. Love going to a Squid Ink,
know,
and I feel like we've got no shortage of good spots down here. And then, for lunch, I eat out a lot, lunch around here. So you can't beat slipping into the Noble South for the Meat and Three lunch there. That's fantastic. Or the Blind Mule that I eat at, just way too much, but I think that, to me, that's my hidden gem if you're looking for one.
Yeah,
I feel
Mule.
like not enough people eat at the Blind Mule. It's one of the best spots downtown.
Yeah, it's a little off the beaten path, a little bit.
Yeah.
But easy to get into right there. Also,
Easy
it's
to get into.
Really easy to park in that area.
You will not be disappointed by anything you have there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite beer? Of all the beers that you've had, limited release, the traditional, what's your favorite Braided River beer?
I mean, my go-to is always Hoppy by Nature.
Yeah.
But then like the kind of favorite in the moment just really changes. I end up being very seasonal, just like most people, and very in the moment. So, I will drink 12 Summer Crushes on the beach and just love it and just absolutely crush them there. That salty passion fruit. But then I will I won't touch a Summer Crush anywhere else.
Right.
And I'll drink something like the beer here at the Del Golfo, just out in the sun, camping trip, kind of something like that. So it all ends up very much, which is what we do try to brew for, is those situational and seasonal kind of moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hoppy is my
that's your go-to.
All the time kind of go-to. Yeah.
What is a good restaurant outside of the Mobile area, but within driving distance, that you like going to? It's like Baldwin County or somewhere like that.
Ooh. Now you're really putting me on the spot, because we don't get out often enough. I'll be way out of the way. The Shed over in Mississippi is a really good
Ocean
spot
Springs,
to stop.
for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That is a good one. And there used to be a Shed on Old Shell Road. 10 or 12 years ago. Yeah, that was a favorite of mine.
That ambiance of the spot right down there. I don't know. That's a kind of a fun spot. I'm trying to over in Baldwin County. there's a Mancy's or something
Yeah.
easy like that. There's Dragonfly,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
at Sunset Point's a good. I don't, we've got 2 younger kids, so we tend to stay pretty Mobile focused.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got 3 young kids too, and so my kids like Squid Ink. They like Wenzel's.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
like they like Moe's Barbecue. So we
Yeah,
kind of
that's a
stick
great
to
spot.
those a
Yeah,
lot
yeah.
because of the
Uh-huh.
when you're going out to eat with your kids, it changes things a little bit. You can't take your
Right.
kids the Hummingbird way.
Right,
unfortunately.
exactly. God, no. And if you're going to get a babysitter, you don't want to be gone as long as going over to the Eastern Shore. So,
That's right.
I
feel you. I'm with you on that. Our last segment of the show is called Chris's Dishes, and this is where I talk about the best dish that I've had recently. And then I can turn it over to you, and if you've got a dish that you've had that you want to talk about, we can do that too. But the best dish that I've had lately was from Bob's Diner, so not too far from you right there on St. Francis Street. But I had the buffalo bacon chicken spinach ranch wrap. Now, that's a lot to say, but man, it was really, really good. It was, it was a little bit spicy. Ranch kind of evened it out a little bit. But really, I couldn't recommend that one enough. It was really good. I got the sides. I got fried okra and turnip greens. That's more my kind of style, of food, So no shame in that. But no, Bob's. That was a great lunch. It was just kind of a quick lunch too. I was by myself, so went in there, got something real quick. That's a real good place when you're by yourself. You need a quick lunch. And it was $9.50.
Yeah,
Where are you going to eat less than $10?
Right.
Of course, by the time you tax and tip and stuff, it was a little over. But still, no,
it's great. Yeah,
it's very affordable. Great lunch. You got to go see. Bob's, I think. But have you had a dish lately that
actually a couple of weekends ago we tried a new brunch spot and did Squid Ink. Which I eat at Squid Ink. I've eaten there for lunch and dinner plenty, but it was actually my first time doing brunch. And they had a fried pork chop and grits plate, and that was just amazing. I had it with an ice cold Del Golfo that was just hitting the spot. And it was like right at noon, or maybe it was a little afternoon. It was that late brunch time, and that pork chop and grits was just
that's good stuff.
Yes, yeah.
What are some other? That kind of reminds me. Maybe some other dishes that pair well with Braided River at some restaurants. Can you think of anything else like that?
It is all kind of situational in that way. Most of our beers go great with just like a good burger or pizza kind of thing. Hoppy is a really good one to pair with a fancier meal because you've got some of that, the bitterness and the fruitiness kind of both work as great counterpoints to like some sweetness and also kind of accentuate some spicy things real nicely.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's good stuff. Well, David, tell everybody where people can come and see you. What's y'all's address? If everybody don't know it, where can they come see, and what are your hours at the tap room?
All right, we're at 420 St. Louis Street. It's in downtown Mobile. You can find all our information on the website, which is braidedriverbrewing.com. We're open 3:30 to 9 for most weekdays. We're maybe 2:30 to 10 on Friday, noon to 10 on Saturday, and noon to 7 on Sunday.
Okay. Yeah.
The times that you want to be getting out for a beer generally. So, catch us for your happy hours or hang out Friday, Saturday night or your Sunday fun day.
Yeah.
So,
And if you don't see it at the grocery store, come by the tap room and grab a six-pack there too, right?
Yeah. And check us out, Publix, Rouse's, Winn-Dixie, Greer's, a bunch of other, specialty shops like Cottage Hill Package. Everything we produce, Cottage Hill Package carries.
Okay.
You can actually use the beer finder on our website to find where some of our seasonals and limited release stuff go. And we have had a great distribution partner with Budweiser Busch Distributing. They're a locally owned company in town that really helped take care of us when we started in the pandemic and got our beer out real fast. And it's just been a great partner with making sure we're really well represented in this area, and you can find us.
That's awesome. Yeah, they're moving right close to you now also.
No, that's another group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
They're still out on 65.
Sorry about that.
But no, that's, not everybody knows the ins and outs, but, anywhere that you find our beer that's not the brewery, it's because they've worked to get it there, and they've done a stellar job for us down here.
Well, David, man, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been informative. It's been fun. Love Braided River and love what y'all are doing
well,
there.
I really appreciate you having me. This has been a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely.
It's great talking with you.
Absolutely. I appreciate everybody listening to the Nappie Award winning Port City Plate podcast. So super excited about that, and we'll be, we got some new episodes coming for sure, and we'll be posting up all this cool stuff on the Port City Plate Facebook group and the Instagram page. So y'all keep following along there, and we will catch you on the next episode.